In the hushed stillness of the medieval night, beneath the soaring arches of an ancient cathedral, time itself seemed to drift like a feather upon the air. The vast stone walls, weathered by centuries of gentle winds and soft rains, stood silent as sentinels of forgotten knowledge. Within those walls, tucked away behind heavy oaken doors, lay shelves of old tomes, their spines bowed and brittle, their pages slumbering in the quiet glow of candlelight. It was in such a place, neither fully awake nor entirely asleep, that stories once lived. Stories that had long ceased to be spoken aloud. The air carried the faint scent of beeswax and aged vellum, mingling with the soft whisper of fabric brushing stone as a solitary figure moved slowly through the vaulted corridors. A monk, robed in brown, his steps measured and unhurried, held a small lantern whose flickering flame cast dancing shadows upon the rough-hewn walls. The light caressed the faces of carved saints and solemn angels, their stony gazes serene beneath the soft glow. In the heart of the cathedral's library, hidden from the bustling world beyond, rested rows of manuscripts, some bound in leather faded to the palest gray, others mere scrolls tied with fraying ribbons. Their words, written by hands long vanished, held secrets not of power or peril, but of quiet contemplation. Prayers penned in careful script, philosophical musings recorded in the margins, illuminated letters blooming like garden flowers amidst the text. The monk's fingers, gentle and worn, hovered over one such manuscript. He did not rush to open it. Instead, he paused, breathing in the stillness, as though honoring not just the words within, but the act of remembering itself. Outside, a soft wind stirred the cathedral's towering windows, carrying the low hum of the night. Distant owls, the rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of a river flowing in patient rhythm. But within, all was calm. The book opened with a tender sigh, its fragile pages unfolding like the wings of a moth in moonlight. The words he read were simple, lines of devotion, reflections on the turning of the seasons, the changing of light. There were no grand declarations, no tales of conquest or conflict, just soft words, meant for no audience beyond the heart of the reader. And in that simplicity lay something profound, a reminder that even in an age marked by towering fortresses and distant battles, there existed quiet places where the only wars fought were those within the soul, and the only victory sought was the stillness of the spirit. In the gentle hush of that moment, the monk closed the book, not with reluctance, but with peace. He traced the cover one last time, then rose slowly, the lantern swaying softly in his hand. He moved without sound, leaving the manuscripts to their eternal rest, their stories safe within their parchment walls. Perhaps in our modern days, so full of noise, of haste, of constant motion, we too might find comfort in such forgotten stillness. To let our minds wander through quiet halls where knowledge slumbers undisturbed, where time slows, and where breath itself seems to settle into rhythm with the slow, beating heart of the ancient world. And as the monk disappears into the soft embrace of shadow and stone, we, too, drift onward, guided by the faintest whispers of the past, toward the next gentle tale, waiting just beyond the veil of dreams. The silent pages of the forbidden Psalter. In the quiet seclusion of a small stone chapel, nestled deep within the walls of a medieval monastery, there rested a book that no one read. It lay not upon a grand lectern, nor displayed beneath beams of colored glass, but hidden carefully, almost lovingly, within a wooden chest lined with soft linen. The book, known only to a select few as the Psalter of Whispered Hours, was neither grand nor gaudy. Its leather cover, once a deep and noble hue, had faded to the soft brown of autumn leaves, its gilded edges dulled by the patient passage of centuries. The chapel itself, small and unadorned, was a place of profound stillness. High above, slender windows allowed beams of pale light to slip through, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the cool air like tiny, golden spirits. The stone walls bore the gentle marks of time. Lichen blooming softly in the corners, the faint erosion of carved reliefs worn smooth by countless years of silent prayer. It was here that the Psalter slept, bound in quietude, its pages filled with delicate lines of hand-drawn script and gentle illustrations. The Psalter held verses and reflections not meant for every eye. Not because they were dangerous or wild, but because they belonged to an older, slower rhythm of devotion. Prayers and meditations that wandered beyond the usual paths, that spoke of stillness, of nature's quiet breath, of the gentle turning of stars above an unchanging earth. The monks who guarded the book did so not out of fear, but from a deep reverence for the fragile wisdom it held. Once, perhaps, it had been read by those seeking a different way of seeing the divine, not through thunderous sermons or rigid laws, but through whispered verses, through the soft interplay of light and shadow, of breath and silence. Over time, however, the Psalter had been set aside, not destroyed, but allowed to fade gently from memory, its voice preserved in silence rather than erased in anger. One evening, under the soft glow of beeswax candles, a monk approached the chest. His hands, worn and steady, lifted the lid with the same care one might offer a sleeping bird. The book emerged, its weight both light and immense, and as he set it down upon a modest stone table, the pages fluttered open of their own accord, as if the Psalter itself remembered. The script, flowing and fine, meandered across the vellum like a gentle stream. Tiny, almost hidden within the margins, were soft illustrations. Simple flowers, curling vines, small birds, all rendered in faded inks of blue and green. There was no urgency in these pages, no sharp commands, only the patient unfolding of thought, of reflection, of quiet wonder. The monk read without haste, each line a breath, each verse a ripple across the still pond of his mind. He did not seek meaning in the way one seeks treasure, but allowed the words to settle softly upon him, like the settling of dusk upon the land. And when he had finished, he closed the book with gentle hands. He returned it to its resting place, not because it was forbidden in anger, but because it belonged to a different time, a slower world where silence was not absence, but presence. Perhaps there is comfort in such stillness, in knowing that some stories remain untold, some prayers unspoken, some pages left unread, not in fear, but in peace. And as the candlelight flickered low, the chapel returned to its gentle hush, carrying us onward softly to the next quiet tale. Lanterns in a library of shadows. Deep within the cool stone walls of an ancient abbey, where time itself seemed to move at the pace of drifting clouds, there existed a library unlike any other. Not vast or grand, not filled with shelves reaching toward painted ceilings, but modest. Its worn wooden shelves bowed under the weight of knowledge both cherished and forgotten. This was a place not of spectacle, but of silence. A place where lanterns cast pools of soft, golden light into the deep, comforting shadows. The air held the familiar scent of old parchment and beeswax, mingled with the subtle trace of wood smoke carried in from distant hearths. Along the narrow aisle between the shelves, a solitary figure moved with unhurried grace. A monk in simple robes the color of faded earth, his hands cradling a small, flickering lantern. The flame wavered gently as he walked, throwing patterns of amber light that danced across the bindings of books that had not been touched for decades, perhaps even centuries. The library, though quiet, was not empty of life. The very walls seemed to breathe in the stillness, the stones murmuring softly with the weight of remembered voices, of words once spoken, prayers once whispered, thoughts once inscribed with careful hands. The books themselves, resting side by side like old friends, bore titles in Latin, Greek, and other tongues now softened by time. Their pages, fragile yet enduring, held the reflections of minds long departed. At the center of the room stood a reading table, its surface worn smooth by the passage of hands and years. The monk set his lantern down, its glow settling gently upon the open pages of a manuscript waiting in stillness. He seated himself without hurry, without ceremony. The rhythm of his breath matched the slow and steady flicker of the candlelight. His fingers, moving with reverence, traced the delicate letters written in careful ink, lines of ancient philosophy, quiet prayers, and simple stories of lives once lived in gentle obscurity. The words were not read aloud. Instead, they were allowed to rise softly within the mind, as though carried on a breeze so faint it barely stirred the air. There was no need to rush, no desire to finish. The act of reading itself was the journey, a quiet companionship with voices of the past. Outside the high narrow windows, the night stretched vast and calm. The world beyond, the rustling fields, the winding river, the slow drift of the stars, continued in its gentle motion. But here, in this sanctuary of quiet thought, time seemed to rest. There is only the soft rustle of parchment, the golden pools of light, and the deep embrace of shadow. The monk, after some time, though time itself felt irrelevant, closed the book with the gentlest of motions. He remained seated for a while longer, his eyes soft, unfocused, as though listening to something far away or perhaps something deep within. And as he finally rose, lifting the lantern once more, the shadows gathered patiently around him, the library exhaling softly as the gentle flame receded down the narrow aisle. Perhaps, in our own hurried world, we might remember such places. The quiet corners where thoughts can unfold without pressure, where words are not consumed but savored, and where the simple glow of a lantern is enough to illuminate the endless landscapes of the mind. And so we drift unhurried onward, guided by the lantern's soft light, toward the next story waiting in the stillness beyond. The gentle dust of forgotten manuscripts. In a quiet corner of a centuries-old scriptorium, where the air was cool and still, there rested a collection of manuscripts long untouched by human hands. The shelves, carved from dark, ancient wood, stood silent beneath the soft weight of time. Here, dust gathered not from neglect, but as a gentle blanket, an offering of the years, a sign of peaceful slumber. The dust itself seemed almost sacred, each fine particle a memory of seasons past, of voices softened into whispers. The room, with its low-arched ceilings and narrow windows, held a timeless calm. Shafts of golden light filtered through the worn glass, illuminating the delicate drift of dust motes as they swirled and settled in the air. There were no footsteps echoing across the stone floor, no hurried rustle of pages, only stillness, as if the very walls had learned to breathe in silence. The manuscripts, resting side by side, were wrapped in faded leather and cloth. Some bore traces of gold leaf, though most had surrendered their brilliance to the gentle erosion of years. Their pages, though fragile, remained intact, lines of ink meandering in careful script, illuminated letters standing like quiet sentinels in the margins. Each book was a vessel of forgotten thoughts, of prayers once murmured, of stories gently fading. A lone figure entered the room, a monk whose steps barely stirred the air. His fingertips, dusted with the soft grime of age, hovered over the bindings without haste. He selected one volume and, with the utmost care, opened it upon a worn wooden table. The spine creaked softly, like the sigh of a door long closed. The pages unfolded slowly, revealing words written in a language nearly lost to time. The text was humble, reflections on seasons, small parables, thoughts on the passing of the moon. There were no declarations of grandeur, no commands of kings. Instead, it was a quiet invitation to stillness, to see the world not in shouts but in whispers. The monk traced the words with gentle eyes, not reading to learn, but simply to be, letting the text settle over him like the dust that swirled above. As the afternoon light dimmed, the monk closed the manuscript once more. He did not shake the dust from its cover. He allowed it to remain, as a soft veil preserving the memory of years untouched. The book returned to its resting place, where it would continue its silent vigil, content in its forgetfulness. Perhaps in our own restless lives, there is something to be learned from these forgotten pages. That not every word must be spoken, not every story told. Some things are meant to be held quietly, treasured in stillness, and left undisturbed beneath the gentle dust of time. And so, with the fading light, we drift onward, our steps slow, our breath deep, as we move softly toward the next story in this endless tapestry of quiet recollections. Ink stains on monastic fingertips. In the still heart of a medieval monastery, within the walls of a simple stone chamber, a quiet work unfolded. A labor not of haste or urgency, but of patience, care, and deep contemplation. This was the scriptorium, the silent place where manuscripts came to life beneath the steady hands of monastic scribes, and where ink left gentle stains upon fingertips that rarely touched anything but parchment and prayer beads. The light inside the scriptorium was soft, filtered through small windows set high in the stone. Candles flickered on narrow shelves, their flames steady but dim, casting golden halos upon the wooden desks arranged in quiet rows. The scent of melted wax and aged vellum filled the air, mingling with the faint, earthy perfume of the ink, made from oak gall, soot, and rainwater gathered with reverence. At one such desk, a monk sat, his figure wrapped in a plain robe of wool, his brow slightly furrowed in concentration. His hand, steady and unhurried, guided the slender nib of a quill across the parchment. Each letter formed with deliberate grace. No haste, no wasted motion. The tip of the feather paused often, not out of uncertainty, but to ensure that every line, every curve, was as gentle as the breath of the morning breeze. His fingertips bore dark stains from the ink, marks that no washing could fully erase. They were the quiet badges of a life devoted to preservation, to words, to knowledge, to the beauty of slow creation. The ink was not simply a tool. It was a bridge between thought and permanence, between the fleeting breath of a human mind and the enduring surface of the written page. The manuscript itself was unassuming, not a grand illuminated Bible, nor a work of kings or saints. It was a humble collection of reflections, musings on the passing of seasons, meditations on the turning of stars, small parables about patience, kindness, and the soft wisdom of the natural world. There were occasional flourishes, an initial letter decorated with vines, a border sketched in quiet greens and golds. But mostly, the page was simple, steady, and calm. Time in the scriptorium moved not in hours, but in strokes of the quill. The monk did not glance at windows or the dimming of light. He wrote until the words themselves told him to pause, to breathe, to fold the manuscript gently for the day's close. His fingers, stained as always, brushed the surface of the parchment in a motion almost like blessing, an offering of time and stillness to the page. Perhaps there is something to be cherished in this. The art of moving slowly, of creating without rush, of allowing small actions to carry meaning beyond their size. The stains of ink on the monk's hands were not imperfections. They were gentle reminders that beauty can emerge quietly from patient devotion. And as the candles flickered lower and the quill came to rest, we too find ourselves ready to drift onward toward the next quiet tale, waiting beyond the turning of another gentle page. The forgotten verses of a wandering scribe. Far from the stone walls of grand monasteries and bustling market towns, along winding dirt paths softened by the tread of many feet, there once traveled a figure as unhurried as the drifting clouds overhead, a wandering scribe. His life was not one of renown or comfort. He carried no heavy coffers of gold, only a small satchel filled with precious scraps of parchment, a simple inkwell, and a slender quill worn smooth by years of gentle use. The countryside through which he journeyed was quiet and vast. Rolling green fields speckled with wildflowers, shadowed groves where birds sang soft hymns to the morning, and small hamlets where the sound of lutes and laughter drifted on the breeze. Yet the scribe moved silently through these places, stopping only when the mood or the hour beckoned him to rest. At the edge of a sun-dappled forest, beneath the outstretched arms of an ancient elm, he often paused to write. There was no audience, no hurried commission awaiting his words. He wrote for the sake of writing. Verses formed softly in his mind, reflections on the simple beauty of the world around him, observations of the soft turning of seasons, musings on the quiet rhythm of footsteps along a dusty road. The parchment he used was sometimes patched, sometimes frayed. The ink, carefully mixed by his own hands, bore the earthy scent of oak and iron. He dipped his quill slowly, thoughtfully, letting each line of verse unfurl as gently as a leaf falling to the ground. The wind, soft and forgiving, carried away his breath as he paused between lines, watching the play of sunlight through the leaves above. His words were not meant for kings or courts. They were meant for the spaces in between, the soft silence before dawn, the hush of twilight, the gentle moments of stillness that so often pass unnoticed. In his verses, rivers sang, stones whispered, and the quiet heart of the world pulsed steady and calm. As dusk descended, the scribe would gather his parchments, tying them carefully with simple twine. Some he left in chapels along the road. Others he tucked beneath stones or into the hands of those willing to listen. He asked for nothing in return. His reward was the act itself, the patient weaving of thought and language, the sharing of soft wisdom with the world. Perhaps many of his verses were lost to time, carried off by the breeze, faded by the rain. Yet in a way, they lived on, not in grand histories or heavy tomes, but in the gentle spirit of quiet reflection he left behind. And so, as the scribe moves on, his footprints vanishing softly into the earth, we, too, drift onward, carrying with us the faint echoes of forgotten verses as we step gently toward the next glowing chapter of this hushed journey. The gentle glow of illuminated letters. In the quiet sanctuary of a medieval scriptorium, where shafts of golden light filtered through narrow windows and dust drifted softly in the air, an art of stillness unfolded. The creation of illuminated letters. This was not work done in haste, nor for the applause of crowds. It was a gentle act, a dialogue between hand, ink, and time itself. The monk, seated at a worn wooden desk, bent low over the page. His robes, dyed in muted shades of earth, whispered softly as he moved. Before him lay a single sheet of creamy vellum, its smooth surface awaiting the first delicate touch of color, the letter to be adorned. A simple initial at the start of a quiet verse. would soon become something more, a window into reverence, a bloom of beauty in the midst of humble text. With the fine tip of a brush, he traced slow, deliberate lines. The letter grew petal by petal, stroke by careful stroke, until vines of deep blue and soft gold curled tenderly around its form. No sharp edges, no harsh colors. The palette was soft, powdered greens, gentle reds, muted ochres. Tiny leaves, small birds, and curling tendrils appeared in miniature, as if painted by the breath of the forest itself. The act was meditative. The scribe's breath moved in rhythm with the rise and fall of the brush, each movement deliberate yet effortless. Outside, the sounds of distant bells and the rustling of trees barely touched the stillness within. This was a different kind of prayer, one not spoken but painted, a devotion expressed through line and light. The illuminated letter, though small, carried within it the weight of time. Its purpose was not to dazzle, but to slow the reader, to invite the eye to linger, the mind to quiet. Each flourish was a gentle reminder that beauty could be found not in the grand and noisy, but in the soft and subtle. As the light outside dimmed and candles were lit one by one, the monk laid down his brush. The letter glowed faintly in the golden haze, an emerald vine unfurling from the curve of a single letter, a bird poised mid-flight, wings outstretched yet stilled forever in quiet grace. Perhaps we, too, in the rush of our own lives, might pause to remember the gentle glow of illuminated letters, to take time not merely to move through words, but to truly see them, to honor the stillness they can offer. And as the scriptorium faded into evening's embrace, the soft breath of painted letters carried us onward, toward the next tranquil story, waiting patiently in the silence ahead. Echoes from the cloister garden. Tucked within the quiet embrace of a medieval monastery, far from the hurried clamor of the world beyond its walls, lay a garden of gentle peace. It was not grand or ornate, no marble statues, no manicured hedges. Instead, it was a simple cloister garden, shaped by the soft hands of time and tended by those who sought not beauty, but stillness. Stone paths, worn smooth by centuries of slow footsteps, meandered between low walls and beds of wildflowers. Lavender and rosemary breathed their delicate fragrance into the air, mingling with the sweet scent of moss and the earthy perfume of old stone warmed by the afternoon sun. The soundscape here was hushed. The soft rustle of leaves, the occasional coo of a dove nesting beneath the eaves, and the distant sigh of wind brushing gently through the open archways. It was here that an elderly monk, his steps as soft as the falling of petals, made his daily walk. His fingers, lined and gentle, brushed the smooth beads of a simple wooden rosary that hung from his hand. He did not rush. Each step was deliberate, each breath an invitation to stillness. His gaze drifted lightly, not fixed on any one thing, but moving from blossom to leaf, from cloud to stone, as though he was both within the garden and a part of it. This garden, like many in monastic life, was more than a place of herbs or quiet labor. It was a sanctuary for the mind, a breathing space for the soul. Here, words were unnecessary. The gentle rhythm of nature, the opening of buds, the soft shifting of shadows, the whisper of breeze through slender branches, offered a silent homily more profound than any spoken sermon. The monk paused by a wild rose bush, its petals open wide to the sun, its scent subtle and sweet. He ran his fingertips along a leaf, feeling the cool softness beneath his skin. His thoughts, like drifting leaves, wandered without urgency. He did not think of tasks unfinished or of days to come. Instead, he remained within the quiet simplicity of the moment, each breath an act of prayer, each footstep a gentle hymn. Such gardens were sacred not because of grand design, but because they allowed the heart to slow. They offered the weary spirit a place to rest, to find stillness without judgment or demand. Within these modest walls, the world outside, the clatter of markets, the weight of ambition, faded softly, leaving only the gentle pulse of life unfolding at its own unhurried pace. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long golden fingers across the stones, the monk slowly returned to the cloister, his rosary still warm beneath his touch, his mind hushed and serene. Perhaps in the noise of modern life, we too might seek such gardens, whether real or imagined, places where thoughts can drift softly like petals on the wind, where breath can slow, and where, even for a moment, we can simply be. And so we step with quiet hearts beyond the cloister walls, moving gently toward the next soft story awaiting in the twilight stillness. The serene silence of sealed tomes. In the cool, quiet depths of an ancient monastery, beyond corridors rarely walked, and through a door of heavy oak and iron, there existed a small chamber of forgotten things. It was neither grand nor ornate, simply a storeroom of sorts, where time itself seemed to slow and settle. Within this hushed space, untouched by footsteps for decades, rested a humble wooden chest, its surface cloaked in a fine, undisturbed layer of dust. The chest was not locked in secrecy, nor guarded with suspicion. It was simply left as it was, resting in the calm acceptance of passing years. Inside, beneath layers of gently worn linen, lay a single book, its leather cover softened and pale from the slow breath of time. No hands had turned its pages in living memory. No voice had recited the words held within. It was a sealed tome, slumbering in quiet dignity. The air in the room was still, cool, and faintly sweet with the scent of old paper, beeswax, and the distant memory of lavender once gathered and dried. Shafts of light, muted through narrow stained glass, fell gently across the chest, casting soft patterns that shifted ever so slightly as the hours passed. Nothing disturbed the silence, save for the occasional whisper of wind brushing softly against the ancient stones. The tome itself, bound centuries ago by careful hands, bore faded gold along its spine. The pages within, though unseen for so long, remained patiently intact. They held no dark secrets, no forbidden knowledge, only words. Words once meant to comfort, to inspire quiet reflection, to honor the rhythm of days and the changing of seasons. The book was not sealed in fear, but simply in time, set aside when no longer needed, left to rest rather than to vanish. A monk, entering the chamber with slow and mindful steps, might pause before the chest, his fingertips brushing away the finest veil of dust. Yet he would not lift the lid. There is no urgency to see what lay within, no need to disturb the calm that had settled over the book like a gentle blanket of years. In leaving it untouched, there was a silent act of reverence, a quiet understanding that some things are best left in stillness. Not every story must be read. Not every question must be answered. There is peace in allowing the unknown to remain as it is, without striving to open every door or turn every page. The sealed tome, in its quiet slumber, whispered not of mystery or loss, but of acceptance, the kind that comes with allowing the flow of time to move as it will, without intervention. And so the monk would leave, his footsteps soft, the door closed gently behind him. The chest and its sleeping book remained, untouched but not forgotten, held safely in the serene silence of memory. Perhaps in our own hurried lives, we too can find comfort in such stillness, to let certain moments, certain thoughts, remain undisturbed, sealed softly in the heart's quiet corners. And as we move onward, with steps as gentle as breath, we leave the sealed tomes behind, drifting calmly toward the next tender echo of the past. the murmurs of an ancient chapel bell. In a quiet valley, where mists gathered like soft blankets over the hills and the world exhaled in slow, steady breaths, there stood an ancient chapel, its stone walls worn smooth by centuries of wind, rain, and patient time. The chapel was small, its windows narrow, its roof crowned by a single bell tower whose presence was humble rather than grand. It was not the kind of place sought by kings or crowds. It belonged to the earth and the sky, to the gentle curve of the land around it. At dawn, when the first pale light brushed the tips of the trees, the bell would sound, a low, gentle note that rose into the morning air like the murmur of some old and kindly voice. The bell did not call with urgency. Its tone was soft, almost drowsy, as if even sound itself respected the stillness of the place. The village below heard its distant chime, not as a command, but as a gentle reminder. That morning had come, that time moved forward, but that there was no need to rush. Within the chapel, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and candle wax. Wooden pews, polished smooth by generations of quiet hands, sat in orderly rows. The only sound was the soft creak of wood, the quiet breath of wind through the narrow windows, and the occasional flutter of a bird's wings beyond the stone walls. A single figure, perhaps an elderly priest, perhaps a passing traveler, might sit in quiet reflection, warmed by the golden haze of morning light. The bell's sound lingered gently in the air, long after the final note had faded, as though the stones themselves remembered the echo. The rhythm of the chapel's bell did not change with the seasons. Morning, noon, and dusk, its voice rose and fell like the breath of the land, timeless, unhurried, and kind. It did not seek attention. It asked nothing of those who heard it. It simply was. Perhaps there is a lesson here, that life need not always move at the pace of urgency, that not every moment must ring with loud voices or restless striving. There is gentleness in steady rhythms, in quiet calls, in the soft murmur of a bell that has sounded across valleys for hundreds of years. And as the mist lifts, the sun rises higher, and the chapel settles once more into its familiar stillness, we carry the memory of that gentle bell with us, allowing its soft cadence to guide us, unhurried, toward the next chapter in our quiet journey. The sound fades, but the stillness remains, leading us softly onward through the unfolding stories of time. The velvet stillness of hidden scriptoria, tucked deep within the stone embrace of a medieval monastery. Beyond the echoing cloisters and the quiet garden paths, there existed a room that few ever entered, known only to a select circle of monks. This was the hidden scriptorium, a space dedicated to the quiet, patient art of writing, where words were not hurried and time itself seemed to fold into stillness. The room was small, with thick walls of cool gray stone. The air held the scent of beeswax candles, their golden flames casting soft halos of light upon the uneven floor. Shadows gathered in the high corners, but there was no sense of gloom, only the velvet hush of centuries, as if the stones themselves had learned to listen. At the heart of this space, a single monk sat at a simple wooden desk. His robes, the color of soft earth, fell gently around him, and his breath moved with the same steady rhythm as the flickering candle beside him. Before him lay a sheet of smooth vellum, pale and empty, awaiting the careful touch of ink. The monk dipped his quill with deliberate slowness, the dark liquid glistening for a moment before the first letter was shaped. The script flowed gently, each stroke of the quill a meditation in motion. The room, silent but for the occasional soft creak of wood or the faint crackle of a wick, seemed to hold its breath as each word took form. There was no rush here, no deadline, no pressure. The work of the scribe was not to complete, but to remain present, to move in harmony with the text, to allow each letter, each flourish, to unfold at its natural pace. Outside the thick walls, the world turned. The seasons shifted, rivers meandered, clouds drifted, but within this sanctuary of stillness, time slowed to the measured pulse of ink upon parchment. The manuscript itself was humble, prayers of quiet devotion, reflections on the changing of seasons, soft meditations written for no audience beyond the soul of the writer. Yet in this simplicity lay a quiet grandeur, a reminder that words, however softly spoken, carried weight and beauty when offered with care. The monk paused often, not to think but to breathe, to let the candlelight warm his fingers, to hear the soft whisper of the flame, to remember that the act of writing was not simply to fill a page, but to dwell in the act itself. The stillness of the scriptorium was not an absence. It was a presence, full and gentle, cradling both thought and hand in quiet grace. And when the day's work drew to a close, the monk carefully set down his quill. He rolled the sheet with the softest of motions, placed it among others resting nearby, and extinguished the candle with a breath no louder than a sigh. The scriptoria returned to darkness, its velvet hush undisturbed. Perhaps in our own lives, there is room for such stillness, to slow, to breathe, to let small acts unfold without hurry. To write, not to be heard, but to be present. And so, we step softly away, leaving the hidden scriptorium behind as we drift gently onward toward the next quiet tale. The gentle pulse of monastic hours. In the timeless rhythm of medieval monastic life, there existed a gentle cadence, a steady breathing of the hours known as the liturgy of the hours. It was not the clanging of time we know today, but a soft and measured flow of prayer, reflection, and silence that shaped the days and nights of the monastery like the turning of the seasons. High above the quiet stone corridors, within the slender bell tower of the abbey, a soft chime marked each sacred moment. The bell did not shout. It murmured, a low, tender sound that drifted over the fields and forests, over rivers and hills, calling not with urgency, but with quiet invitation. Within the chapel, the air was hushed. The wooden benches, smoothed by years of hands resting upon them, lined the space in gentle symmetry. Candles flickered softly, casting golden pools of light onto the worn stone walls. The monks, clad in simple robes, gathered in stillness. No one hurried. No one spoke louder than the breath of prayer. The hours, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, flowed in a seamless pattern. Each was marked by soft chanting, by whispered psalms, by moments of deep and restful silence. Time here was not divided by ambition or toil, but by breath, by voice, by the rising and falling tides of devotion. Imagine the soft sound of voices in unison, their tones low and steady, weaving together words that floated upward into the rafters like threads of silver mist. The monks' eyes often remained lowered, their faces serene, their hearts resting in the simplicity of repetition. There was no striving for perfection, only the gentle offering of each word, each breath, as it came. Outside, the world continued. Leaves rustled, rivers moved, winds stirred the branches of distant trees. But within the abbey's walls, the hours unfolded like petals, slowly, quietly, one after another, without haste. And as the final bell of the day sounded, its tones soft and round as a river stone, the monks returned to their solitude. The stillness of the evening stretched out before them, deep and welcoming. Even in sleep, the rhythm of the hours continued, weaving dreams with the same quiet threads of peace. Perhaps in our own days, so often hurried, fractured by endless noise, we can remember the gentle pulse of those ancient hours. The way time can soften when measured not in tasks, but in moments of breath, reflection, and grace. And so, as the last soft chant fades into the air, we drift gently onward, carried by the calm rhythm of time itself, toward the next tranquil chapter waiting beyond the horizon of dreams. The soft echo of pilgrims' footsteps along the winding paths of medieval Europe, where the land stretched wide and the sky unfolded in endless gray, there moved the gentle steps of a solitary pilgrim. The journey was not hurried, nor marked by fanfare. It was quiet, each footfall falling softly upon the time-worn stones, each breath carried away on the whispering wind. The road meandered through green meadows and golden fields, past stands of ancient trees whose bare branches swayed like silent choirs. There was no urgency in the pilgrim's stride. His feet, wrapped in simple leather sandals, pressed gently into the earth with the slow rhythm of a heart at peace. Above him, the clouds drifted in soft procession, casting shadows that came and went without sound. The pilgrim carried little: a modest satchel with bread and dried fruit, a wooden staff worn smooth by countless miles, and the steady presence of his own quiet thoughts. He did not walk to escape, nor to arrive quickly. Each step was part of the journey itself, an act of devotion expressed not through speed, but through patient movement, through the acceptance of distance, of time, of the world unfolding gently beneath his feet. Birdsong accompanied him at times, soft melodies that rose and fell like sighs. The breeze stirred the tall grasses, setting them to swaying in graceful patterns that stretched to the horizon. Now and then, the distant outline of a chapel or a wayside shrine appeared, small markers of faith and rest along the path, but the pilgrim did not hurry to reach them. He let the road carry him, as rivers carry leaves, without strain, without demand. Hours passed like the slow drift of clouds. The sun traced its gentle arc overhead, the warmth of midday giving way to the cool embrace of evening. The pilgrim paused beneath an old elm, its gnarled branches sheltering him like an ancient guardian. There he rested, not because of exhaustion, but because the moment called for stillness. He listened to the soft music of the wind, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of unseen birds. His heart, unburdened by destination, rested as easily as his body. In this gentle rhythm of walking and resting, of moving and pausing, the pilgrim found something deeper than arrival. He found the quiet presence of the path itself, the way each step, however small, was complete in its own time. Perhaps, in our own journeys, we too might learn from this unhurried grace. That life is not always a matter of reaching the next milestone, but of noticing the soft echo of our footsteps, the feel of earth beneath us, the quiet pulse of each moment as it unfolds. And so, as the pilgrim rises once more, his staff tapping softly against the stones, we too drift onward, guided not by haste, but by the gentle call of the path ahead, carrying us softly to the next waiting story. The golden quiet of forgotten sanctuaries, hidden among the gentle folds of the medieval countryside, deep within forests where the light slants softly through ancient trees, there stood a chapel, small, weathered, and forgotten. Time had drawn its quiet veil over this place, allowing it to rest in the peaceful company of moss, wildflowers, and the slow turning of the seasons. The stone walls, once bright and carefully laid, now bore the soft touch of age. Ivy traced its way along the edges, tender green tendrils curling into every crevice. The roof, of faded tile and worn timber, sagged gently beneath the weight of years. And yet, though no footsteps crossed its threshold and no voices filled its air, the chapel remained, a sanctuary held in quiet reverence by the land itself. Within, the air was hushed. The high, arched windows, some still cradling fragments of colored glass, cast faint pools of dusty light across the flagstone floor. Dust motes drifted in slow spirals, stirred only by the occasional sigh of wind that slipped through the cracks. The wooden pews, softened and smoothed by the hands of countless generations, stood silently, row upon row, like old friends resting together in the twilight. At the heart of the chapel, the altar remained. Its cloth, faded to pale gold, bore the gentle stains of candle wax and time. A single beeswax candle, unlit for many years, stood sentinel, a quiet witness to the prayers once whispered in this space, to the songs once sung, to the soft tears and hopeful smiles of those who had come and gone. No one disturbed the chapel now. It belonged to the stillness. Birds nested in the eaves, ivy traced patterns on the stone, and the forest pressed gently around it, as if cradling the old sanctuary in leafy arms. Yet its presence endured, not forgotten, but simply resting, a soft memory woven into the fabric of the land. Perhaps there is a quiet lesson in such places, that not every space must be filled with sound to be sacred, that beauty lingers even when unobserved, that some things are meant to endure not through constant use, but through gentle retreat into silence. The golden quiet of the chapel, its soft light, its resting stones, its empty pews, speaks not of abandonment, but of peaceful slumber. A sanctuary not for noise, but for stillness. Not for urgency, but for gentle presence. And so, we leave the forgotten sanctuary behind, its golden light lingering softly in memory as we walk gently onward toward the next story, carried on the breeze, embraced by the quiet hum of the ancient world. The hushed murmurs of sacred margins. In the quiet chambers of a medieval scriptorium, where time moved as gently as the flicker of candlelight, there unfolded an almost invisible tradition, one that whispered not from the main lines of the text, but from the soft, slender margins that framed each page. These were the sacred margins, the silent spaces where scribes, in moments of quiet reflection, left tiny murmurs of thought, words not meant to command attention, but to gently linger at the edges. The manuscript at the center of this story was not grand. It did not hold the weight of royal decree or the fierce drama of legend. It was a simple volume of psalms, its vellum pages delicately worn, its ink faded to soft brown. The scribe, seated in the steady glow of beeswax candles, bent low over his work. His hand moved slowly, the tip of his quill tracing not just the sacred lines of text, but also, occasionally, the fine spaces beside them. In the margins, the monk wrote not with boldness, but with gentleness, small notes, reflections, quiet observations. One corner held a brief mention of the weather. Today the wind sings through the stones. Another bore the outline of a leaf, perhaps inspired by the gentle rustle of the garden beyond the walls. Further along, a single line of whispered prayer. Lord, keep my heart as still as this ink. These marginalia, as they would come to be known, were not meant for future readers. They were for the moment itself, fleeting thoughts captured like the soft breath of a sigh. They rested there, on the edges of the grand text, as tender echoes of the human heart, small and unassuming, yet quietly enduring. The act of writing in the margins was not seen as distraction, but as devotion. In those tiny letters, a life unfolded in fragments. The passing of seasons, the rhythm of bells, the changing light of day, and the soft stirrings of inner contemplation. The margins became a place where the scribe could meet the text not just as a duty, but as a companion, where thought and ink could drift together in peaceful union. As the monk continued his work, his fingertips stained with ink, he paused to warm his hands near the candle's gentle glow. Outside, the sound of evening birds drifted faintly through the narrow windows. He returned to his writing, not in haste, but in calm, adding another quiet note in the corner of the page. Perhaps a reflection on patience, perhaps a single word of gratitude. And so the manuscript grew, not only in its formal lines of scripture, but in its soft edges of humanity. Generations later, long after the main text might fade into familiarity, it would be the small notes, the hushed murmurs of sacred margins, that would whisper most tenderly of the hand that held the quill, of the heart that quietly beat behind the words. Perhaps we, too, can learn to honor the small margins of our own lives, the quiet moments, the soft thoughts, the gentle echoes that shape us in ways both fleeting and timeless. And as we step softly away from this resting page, the murmurs linger and we drift onward toward the next still water waiting beyond the bend of the story. The still waters of monastic reflections. Beyond the stone walls of many medieval monasteries, where the rhythm of prayer and contemplation unfolded in gentle constancy, there often lay a place of deep serenity, a still pond, a slow-moving river, or a quiet lake. These waters, reflective and calm, mirrored the sky above and the hearts of those who came to sit at their edges. It was here at the water's soft boundary that a solitary monk might seek respite, not to escape, but to listen, to the silence, to the breath of the land, to the soft murmur of the world when it has no need for words. Imagine the scene, a figure in a simple robe, seated on the gentle curve of the grassy bank. The morning mist hovers above the water, silvered by the early light. The only sounds are the occasional ripple of fish beneath the surface, the distant call of birds, and the faintest rustle of reeds swaying in the soft breeze. The monk's hands rest loosely in his lap. His gaze drifts, not fixed on anything, but resting in the quiet itself. The water reflects the sky in perfect stillness. The clouds, pale and unhurried, drift above and below at once. The line between earth and heaven blurs. Time softens into something round and unmeasured. There's no urgency here, no task pressing. The stillness is its own gift. The monk breathes slowly, allowing thoughts to rise and fall without resistance, like the gentle undulations of the water before him. He recalls a line from an old prayer. The soul is as still as the pond when the wind is at rest. And so he lets the breath come and go, the heart beat gently, the mind quiet itself in the shelter of the moment. Hours may pass unnoticed, or perhaps only minutes. It matters little. The lake, the sky, the air, each offers itself without demand. The monk stands eventually, brushing dew from his robe, and walks slowly back toward the monastery's distant spires. Yet something within him remains seated by that water, calm and untroubled, as if part of him has merged with the stillness forever. Perhaps we, too, can find such places in the heart, small quiet ponds within the busy landscapes of our lives. Moments where we can set down the weight of thought, the pull of urgency, and simply rest. To sit beside still waters, if only in imagination, and let the reflections steady the soul. And so, as the surface of the lake drifts back to perfect stillness, we rise gently, moving softly onward to the next story, carried by the breath of calm, the gentle pulse of peace. The gentle drift of forgotten chants. In the hushed interior of a medieval chapel, built of cool stone and softened by the golden haze of candlelight, there once rose a sound as gentle as breath itself. the ancient melodies of Gregorian chant. These were not songs meant to rouse or excite, but instead to cradle the soul in quiet reflection, to carry the heart into realms of stillness, far removed from the restless murmurs of the outside world. The voices, low and steady, would rise together in perfect unison, never rushed, never strained. Each note flowed into the next like ripples upon a tranquil pond, moving slowly, as if time itself had stretched out its hand to hold the music in soft suspension. The chant did not demand attention. It drifted. It hovered. It lingered like the morning mist clinging to the contours of an ancient hillside. The air inside the chapel, touched by the faint scent of beeswax and incense, carried the chant lightly. The stone walls absorbed some of its softness, allowing echoes to rise and fall in gentle waves, filling the space without overwhelming it. The monks, their voices steady but subdued, stood in simple rows, their eyes lowered, their breaths rising and falling in quiet unity. There was no need for instruments. The human voice, plain, unadorned, and calm, was enough. The Latin words of the Psalms, though known by heart, were less important than the sound they shaped, the melody that wrapped around them like flowing silk. Even when a phrase was forgotten or a note faltered, the chant continued, unbroken, like a stream that winds gently around each stone in its path. These melodies, now little more than whispers in the memory of time, once marked the rhythm of the hours, matins before dawn, vespers as the sun sank low, compline at the close of day. The chant was the heartbeat of monastic life, steady, quiet, and enduring. Even those who did not understand the words could feel the comfort of their rise and fall. The way the music seemed to drift upward like breath returned to the sky. Perhaps in this we find a gentle lesson, that not all things need to be understood or grasped with the mind. Some sounds, some moments, are meant to be felt in the soft spaces of the heart. The most calming melodies do not shout or dazzle. They drift, they rest, they become part of the stillness itself. And though most of those voices have long since fallen silent, their echoes remain, carried on the soft winds of time, woven into the stones of forgotten chapels and the silent pages of ancient manuscripts. And so we drift onward, with the memory of those gentle chants still lingering, like the faint breath of music heard only in dreams, toward the next quiet tale, waiting just beyond the horizon of this peaceful journey. The soft glow of gilded reliquaries. In the dim interior of a medieval church, where shafts of pale afternoon light slanted through narrow windows, there rested an object both humble and precious, a small gilded reliquary. It sat upon a stone altar, its golden surface catching the soft flicker of nearby candles, each flame swaying gently in the still air. The reliquary was not grand in size. It was a modest chest, carefully crafted by hands long vanished. Its gold plating, though dulled by the centuries, still gleamed faintly, reflecting light in soft ripples as though touched by the breath of time itself. Small enamel inlays glowed in subtle hues, emerald green, lapis blue, colors that had softened but not disappeared. Within this quiet vessel, it was said, rested a relic, perhaps a fragment of bone, a shred of cloth, or a tiny object once touched by a hand considered holy. Yet the reliquary's true beauty did not lie in what it contained, but in what it inspired, a sense of reverence, of wonder, of peaceful contemplation. The chapel around it stood silent. The carved stone arches curved overhead like the ribs of an ancient ship, and the air held the lingering warmth of incense. Visitors, few and far between, would pause before the reliquary, not to marvel in loud voices, but to stand in quiet reflection. The soft glow of the gold, the gentle dance of the candlelight, the stillness of the space. all combined to create a moment suspended from the rush of time. One could imagine the hands that had crafted it, careful, unhurried, devoted to the work not for fame or wealth, but for the sake of offering something beautiful to the divine. The reliquary, in its stillness, whispered of patience, of care, of the quiet endurance of sacred things. Outside, the world moved forward. Rivers flowed, bells chimed, seasons shifted. But inside, time seemed to slow, to soften. The reliquary remained, a small golden heart in the vastness of stone and silence, its light steady, its presence gentle. And perhaps in this quiet, we find a reminder that beauty need not be loud to be lasting. That small things, kept not for display, but for devotion, can hold a peace far deeper than any grandeur. The reliquary, bathed in soft glow, stood unmoved as the shadows of evening lengthened, its golden face reflecting not the brilliance of the sun, but the tender hum of candlelight, unfolding slowly, endlessly, in stillness. And so we step away, gently, leaving the quiet gleam behind as we move softly onward, guided by the flicker of the next peaceful story, waiting in the hush of the path ahead. The drowsy haze of candlelit sermons. In the soft hush of a medieval evening, when the last traces of daylight had long since faded beyond the horizon, a gentle glow stirred within the thick stone walls of a village chapel. There, in the gentle embrace of flickering candlelight, the people gathered, not in great numbers, nor in restless anticipation, but quietly, as one might gather around the slow warmth of a fading fire. The air was filled with the faint scent of beeswax and old timber, a warmth that clung to the cold stone like a gentle hand. The chapel's high arches, lost in shadow, echoed softly with the low murmur of an approaching voice, the priest, in simple robes, stepping toward the worn stone pulpit. No grand proclamation marked his arrival. His voice rose slowly, in soft monotone, each word unfurling with the unhurried rhythm of breath. There was no urgency in the delivery, no need to stir or command. The words themselves drifted like autumn leaves on still air, floating, circling, gently settling without weight. The congregation, seated upon smooth wooden benches, did not strain to listen. They allowed the words to wash over them, to fade as easily as they arrived. Some closed their eyes, their hands resting loosely in their laps, their breath deepening in quiet reflection. Others gazed softly toward the soft shimmer of the candles, the gentle dance of golden light upon the ancient stone walls. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the chapel's narrow windows, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant fields. The lowing of cattle in the distance, the faint call of night birds, the muted rustle of leaves, all seemed to echo the same slow, steady rhythm of the priest's voice. The world beyond and the world within moved as one, breathing in peaceful unison. The sermon, as was custom, did not seek to teach with force. Instead, it meandered gently through verses and parables, reminders of kindness, of patience, of the quiet passage of days. The words, softly spoken, mattered less in meaning than in movement, a stream of sound flowing without edges, without insistence, without haste. As the candles burned lower, their flames leaning into the soft breath of the room, the sermon came to its gentle close. The priest offered no final command, no call to action. He lowered his voice to a near whisper, his words fading softly into the waiting silence. And one by one, the villagers rose without hurry, their footsteps soft against the stone, their hearts untroubled, their minds lulled by the gentle haze of the evening. Perhaps, in this quiet ritual, we find a timeless lesson, that not every word must be clung to, not every message grasped. Some things are meant to drift through us like the wind, unmeasured, unheld, yet still gently shaping the heart. And so, as the candles dim to quiet embers and the chapel settles once more into soft darkness, we drift onward, slowly, calmly, toward the final story of the night, where silence itself becomes the gentlest of guides. The endless sleep of silent libraries. In the deepest quiet of ancient monasteries, beyond cloistered gardens and winding corridors, there remain forgotten libraries, rooms untouched by time, where shelves of age would still cradle the weight of countless books resting in eternal stillness. The air within such a place is soft and cool, scented faintly with dust, old parchment, and a lingering breath of candle smoke. Here, the light filters gently through colored glass, casting soft pools of amber and gold upon rows of sleeping manuscripts. The silence is not empty, but full, a rich stillness woven from centuries of breathless waiting. The books themselves, bound in leather darkened by age, their pages yellowed and feathered at the edges, sit patiently upon the shelves. Some bear titles embossed in faded gold. Others lie unmarked, their covers worn smooth by hands long vanished. Yet none call out, none demand to be read. They simply are guardians of forgotten knowledge, resting in the deep hush of time's embrace. No footsteps sound here, no voices break the air. The only movement is the soft drift of motes of dust, stirred gently by the faintest breath of air through a narrow window. The world outside, of seasons turning, of rivers running, of bells tolling, feels distant, like a dream one might glimpse for a moment before returning to slumber. One might imagine a solitary monk, his hands worn yet gentle, stepping softly through this sanctuary of words. He does not seek a specific text. He does not rush. He simply passes between the shelves, tracing fingertips along the spines, honoring the quiet presence of the books without disturbing their endless rest. Perhaps in these forgotten libraries, we find a reflection of something deeper, the way some thoughts, some stories, are meant not for action or display, but for quiet keeping. There is peace in knowing that not every truth must be spoken aloud, that some wisdom may simply exist, held softly, untouched, serene. The books slumber on, their pages untouched by time, their words breathing softly beneath closed covers. They do not long to be opened. They do not grieve their silence. In the endless stillness of these hallowed rooms, they remain, eternal witnesses to a world that moves beyond their walls, their gentle sleep unbroken. And perhaps we, too, can learn to rest in such stillness, to let our minds soften, our thoughts drift, our hearts quiet in the presence of things that do not ask, do not pull, do not rush, to simply be, as these silent libraries are, at peace. And so, dear listener, as our journey through these quiet tales draws to a close, we leave the soft halls of forgotten books behind. Let your thoughts settle like dust upon quiet shelves. Let your breath slow. Let your heart drift gently into the endless sleep of peaceful dreams. 21. Closing. Thank you for listening. May your night be filled with gentle rest and quiet light. Sleep well.